Hello everyone, this is Business Africa, your weekly review of the African economy. Coming up, renewable energies at the heart of the industrial revolution in Africa. Governments urged to invest more in low-carbon energy technologies. And countries like the Ivory Coast resolved to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 28% over the next 10 years as they explore hydroelectricity and thermal power plants. Plus, the strategic partnership between Samsung and Glencore, they have agreed to extend mining cobalt in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That is in part 2 of the show. Now, Africa is considered the powerhouse for renewable energy. According to the International Agency for Renewable Energies, the continent's production capacity could reach 310 gigawatts by 2030. It is an assurance then for economic growth if you go by economist Carlos Lopez, who believes in massive investment in renewable energies. In this regard, the African Development Bank is playing its part, supporting the development of this sector, having disbursed a budget of more than $600 million to support African initiatives in hydroelectricity, wind, solar and geothermal energy. It is particularly encouraging countries to develop mini-grids, which are becoming more and more essential in terms of offering cost-effective electrification solutions in rural areas. Many countries on the continent are picking up on these renewable energies. With a population of more than 26 million people, Ivory Coast wants to tap into its energy mix by exploiting the fields of hydroelectricity and thermal power. It's the first to launch into Africa's floating solar power plant. It is also counting on its many dams under construction to reach 6,600 megawatts by 2030. More by Wahane Johnson Sambo and Claudian Sana.
Ivory Coast is striving to supply electrical energy to its growing population while reducing its greenhouse gas emissions. The country, whose electricity consumption has increased by 193% in 43 years, has an annual consumption of about 340 kilowatt hours per person. Its electricity production is expected to exceed 2,737 gigawatt hours in the first quarter of 2020. This from thermal power estimated at 67.55% and hydroelectricity estimated at 32.45%. The country, which wants to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by up to 28% by 2030, has embarked on the development of renewable energies. Several projects are underway, including the construction of the largest biomass power plant in West Africa, which should eventually supply 42% of the energy mix by 2030. The country is also building the continent's first floating solar power plant. The West African nation currently has a network of 5,000-kilometer high-voltage lines and an installed capacity of 2,200 megawatts.
Let us hear more from Patrick Tunui, the regional representative of the World Association for Off-Grid Lighting for East Africa. He joins us from Nairobi. Hello, Mr. Tunui, and welcome to Business Africa.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
First off, what are the opportunities and risks of switching to renewable energy for African countries?
So I think renewable energy is a really exciting sector that can really help solve some core challenges that we have in Africa. One, I think we are all aware that climate change is real, and it is affecting a lot of Africa, from agricultural production, from health, and a number of things. So renewable energy technologies are one way to begin to mitigate things like carbon dioxide emissions and other things that are really hurting the environment. But beyond that, today of the about 800 million people who don't have access to energy, most of them, about 600 million, live in sub-Saharan Africa. And governments generally do not have enough money to make sure everybody has universal access. And number two, there are people who really live in rather challenging places to provide the grid extension to. And we in Africa are blessed with the power of the sun, which is a renewable technology. And solar technologies is showing that these technologies have evolved to the point and matured that they can reliably provide energy access to communities who are off-grid, and it will allow them to do the core things that they need to do, have lighting in their homes for basic use, for education, for other things that they need to do with lighting. It can allow them to charge things like cell phones, run TVs, and run radios with pretty efficiently. And we are even more and more now seeing that these sort of technologies can be used in productive applications like for irrigation and smallholder farming.
How big is the gap between investment and demand for renewable energy in Africa?
Honestly, it is huge. And I want to be very specific. Right now, I'm referring particularly only to the off-grid sector, which is the investment demand and need for investment, as well as the demand for consumers who are off the grid. And so this consumer base, these citizens, these households, these communities that are part of our people currently today don't enjoy the services that we all take for granted, and they need access to energy really for livelihoods and for all these things. However, to reach them will take a lot of money. What is this money needed for? One, to provide these technologies, particularly to rural households, if you're going to demand for them to pay it upfront fully in cash, this is a burden to them and it's a challenge. So we need to stimulate consumer financing or models that allow consumers to be provided with electricity over time or access to these products over time. Similarly to the way with the grid, you will pay a small utility bill over time, and you're never asked to pay full upfront for everything that goes to provide you that electricity connection.
Let's look at South Africa, for example. The country is mainly dependent on coal-fired power plants that have struggled to limit power outages. Could renewable energy save the most industrialized country in Africa?
Yes, South Africa is struggling with the coal-powered plants, and I believe part of the issue that they have is as these power plants need to be taken offline for refurbishment, they just don't have enough power to be able to service all the needs that they have. And when we look at off-grid solutions, we find that they can actually coexist pretty well with the grid, and it would allow a lot of households and communities for the periods when the grid is just not available to be able to continue functioning. Today, the technology may not be able to run heavy industrial machinery or high energy demand products, but it could really take a lot of the load off and allow people that, yes, the grid is not there, but you still have access to energy that will allow you to keep your offices running from lights, to use your computers, to run, make sure your mobile equipment is on and functioning. And I believe in the long term, if South Africa looks at solar for the utility scale, they would also see some of those benefits to see that reduction in the carbon emitting technologies.
Thank you, Patrick Tenui, for your insights. That is the regional representative of the World Association for Off-Grid Lighting for East Africa.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll see how Samsung and Glencore managed to agree on mining cobalt in the DRC.
C'est après la pause.